what we have is a virtual set of loudspeakers, the 714. We still reproduce 714 if we're listening to Apple Music, but we treat them as virtual loudspeakers. And what the software and the dipoles does is it delivers them in a physical space with either 2, 3, or 4 speakers.
Hey everybody, Dave Lindbergh in Hong Kong with another episode of THD Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for subscribing, all that good stuff. Today we have a company from the UK called Airsound, and they're doing spatial audio, and it looks to be pretty cool stuff. They're getting some neat press, so we wanted to check that out. So we're going to get into that in a moment, but without delay, thanks to the Ltd Association, a great networking organization for people in audio manufacturing. We encourage people to reach out to Barry and see how he could help you with your business and networking needs. And also Audio Express, always a good choice to find out what's going on new in audio manufacturing, in new technologies, everything audio. We encourage people to check that out. So without delay, we've got Simon in Japan, ready for the weekend.
Yep, all set.
All right. And we've got Guy and Daniel Fletcher coming to us from the UK. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys.
Morning. It's great to be here.
All right. So, yeah, Airsound, spatial audio. You guys are in a recording studio. That's a statement. So tell us about it, please.
Well, yeah. So Airsound, we came up with the technology Airsound Spatial, which really tackles the problem, which is what I think is on everyone's minds in the recording industry, of how do you deliver spatial audio well to consumers. If you want to hear something like Dolby Atmos, typically you're required 7.1.4, 12 speakers like we have in this studio here. That's pretty practical. And spatial audio is something that can be delivered in other ways, like binaural. But we've come up with a technology which we call Airsound Spatial, which requires far fewer speakers, but gives you an experience like the studio. So, and Guy, my brother here, has been helping me a lot because
Yes, my background is in the professional audio world. I was in a band called Dire Straits for many years. I worked with Mark Knopfler. I'm his producer and engineer, and we base ourselves in this studio, British Grove in London, which Mark owns. And we've developed this technology in this studio, and not in this actual room, in Studio 2, which is the Atmos room. So we've been. My problem with Atmos is that the biggest problem that all engineers who mix in Atmos feel when they're creating Atmos is that you get to this realization that nobody's actually going to hear it the way that you are mixing it. In other words, with this multi-speaker setup, most people consume Atmos in binaural mode, which is underwhelming when you compare it to the true, how you hear it in the studio. And Airsound was a technology that had been around quite a while, invented by Dan and our father. We'll go more into that later, but I suggested about 3 years ago, wouldn't it be amazing to develop that technology specifically for Atmos and spatial audio? And Dan went ahead and actually did it. And the results are remarkable is an understatement, because everybody who hears it, particularly in the professional world, and I'm talking about engineers who actually mix Atmos, are kind of blown away by it, because you can virtually recreate 7.1 or any number of speakers with as few as 2 of our Airsound speakers. So that's where we are at the moment.
So so now a lot of questions. So are you using 2 drivers? Are you using some heavy DSP processing? Maybe let's jump into a presentation and kind of explain what's going on for everybody.
Sure. Okay. Well, that room is in fact the upstairs room here at British Grove, the Mark Knopfler's place, which is where we've really developed this technology. And our statement there, effortless spatial audio, is really what we're all about. As said before, that our core technology is fewer speakers. We're all about making spatial audio effortless to deliver. it's spatial audio that works in the real world without the complexity and without compromise as well. I mean, that's the fundamental thing, is we're trying to recreate the studio experience of spatial audio, but without the demands that traditional approaches take. So, and we are fundamentally a technology company. You know, we do make speakers, but we make them really just to demonstrate the technology for people in the industry. But really what we're trying to do is work with partners. But the key reason to use AirSound technology is you can build a spatial audio system with a much reduced cost and complexity compared to the solutions that are currently thought of. Another key benefit is, and it'll become apparent as to how this happens, is you've got a very flexible layout. You know, normally when you walk into a room, you have to put speakers in, and then you have to consider where you're going to put your furniture in the room. This is much more flexible in that you can put the speakers where you want, and the technology delivers the sound and adapts basically to the room.
Okay, so now more questions. Are you using room correction and microphones for feedback for the reflections? It's all coming, hopefully.
Questions, keep those questions handy, but they'll be short answers, mostly negative. but it's a very different approach, as you'll see. We're able to promise a very wide and stable sweet spot, and really that comes down to there being fewer speakers. And it's a very natural and detailed. But I think most importantly is for the past year we've been developing and refining the technology, but also getting people in the industry using it. And by industry, I'm talking about the professional recording and mixing and engineering community, who are now using it and have been giving us feedback and endorsing it. Really, colleagues of yours, Guy.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of my primary role in this venture, to get people who I know in the industry to hear it and using it. And we've had remarkable success. We've got systems in LA, in Nashville, and most of them are in London. And we've got people like Peter Cobbin, who's a very well-known engineer, a huge amount of film work, and he uses a system. We've got mix engineers who mix Atmos, are using systems to check their mixes, because one of the other big problems is that very few ways of getting clients to actually check mixes that are made. But with this system, you can literally throw a 2-speaker system in the back of your car and drive it anywhere to someone's house and set it up in 15 minutes, and they can check your Atmos mixes, and it's an incredibly faithful reproduction. So we're very happy that it's been so readily adopted by so many people, and it's we're kind of on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. We weren't quite expecting it to be this impressed, people to be that impressed, but everybody is. So, and partly because it's incredibly immersive. You get it straight away as soon as you hear it. Of course, it's one of those things that you kind of have to hear because it's kind of unbelievable, but it really does work.
Okay.
So, and really just, it's great to be here with you because really we've now got this technology very well developed. And our next step really is to work with partners. We're looking for partners, creators, brands, people who've got crazy ideas, who want to, deliver spatial audio in almost any situation. We want to work with them, right? We want to get this technology out there and in use in the real world.
Because there is this huge gap in both pro and consumer markets where you've got all this Atmos available and nobody gets to experience it in the way that it should be experienced. So everybody's scrambling around to try and solve that problem. And we're offering a solution.
Can we just to go back one step quickly, and could you explain a little bit, what does it mean to mix for Atmos? You mentioned 10, 11, 12 speakers.
Yes. The difference between Atmos and stereo is, of course, Atmos is 300. You have a 360-degree landscape to play with, so you can place sounds all around you. It's very much endorsed by Dolby. When we mix Atmos, we use a thing called the Dolby renderer, which creates the file, the master file, and it's a multi-channel file that is streamed currently mostly by Apple Music. They stream their own version of Atmos, which they call Apple Spatial. And so the difference between stereo and Atmos is huge. But what the wonderful benefits of Atmos, which very few people get to experience, is that you can listen to a track that you know very well. Brothers in Arms is a particularly good example because it's something that I mix. People who know and the music from that album is ingrained in your DNA almost. I'm talking about fans, obviously. And when they hear the immersive version, the Atmos version, which is effectively a remix, it's like hearing something for the first time. It's incredibly emotional, and it's sonically it's wonderful, which is why all the pros love it, because you can hear the sonics of a good recording incredibly well. It's incredibly.
What's kind of the architecture of producing with Atmos? So you have the artists in the studio, they have a microphone or they have whatever hookup, and how does that convert into this multi-channel audio?
It's really a remix. I mean, the recording doesn't necessarily have to be done in any differently. You can use multi-channel, multi-microphone arrays to recreate Atmos, but that's not the essence of it. The essence of it is about remixing and literally just instead of placing things in a stereo landscape, you have the 360 environment, which is incredibly exciting when you start to understand what it can give you. It's sort of something that you kind of have to hear it to understand it, and it's really is a new way to listen to music that sadly at the moment so few people get to experience. But it is essentially a remix.
Are there special tools that you use when you're creating the mix provided by Dolby, for example? So you might have traditional stereo mix and somebody has a pan capability. Now you've got something totally different. How does that look?
All the main audio workstations provide Atmos capability now. It's standard, and they all provide an internal renderer which renders the main master file that you create. Everything else is the same as mixing as in stereo. It's just that you have more flexibility, you have more space for reverbs, you can play with sounds. It's incredibly creative. And there are some wonderful Atmos mixes out there now. It was a little bit Wild West about 5 years ago because people were experimenting and having fun. And it's quite easy to ruin something that was sounded great in stereo by pulling it apart. But now engineers and artists are much more aware of that and very careful about how they do things. But essentially, it is just a remix. And there's really not that much in terms of complexity to it, apart from the number of possible channels.
Yeah. And so Airsound is taking this, how many channels? Is it? It's a variable number of channels.
Yeah.
In terms of what you have available to you in the mix, you have 128 different what they call objects and beds, which is a 714 or 916, that's the standard speaker layout. That 714 is kind of the standard because that's what Apple stream.
And just to detail that, guy, so 714 is like center, left, right, far left, far right, rear left, rear right, sub, and then the up firing as well.
4 speakers in the ceiling.
And right. Of course, okay.
Who wants to put speakers in the ceiling in your lounge? That's part of our problem, consumers. So yes, 714.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And in the film industry, 916 or 914 is pretty standard now. And of course, our software adapts to any number of speakers.
Right. And yeah, commercially, I could see a huge advantage. I mean, I started in audio manufacturing in doing rear wireless speakers, and no wife would let anybody put the rear speakers in the house. It's objectively frowned upon. So if you guys have a more compact way to deliver the Dolby experience, that's probably going to be a winner. All right, sorry, please continue.
That's exactly right. In a sentence, that sums it up. But looking ahead, so introductions. We've already done introductions, but a bit about our backgrounds. So I've been in the audio industry for a number of years, really on the electroacoustic and loudspeaker development side. Some work in the pro industry, quite a lot in the consumer industry. I know we met each other before in that world, Dave, and until recently, I was heading up the Roberts radio line of products. But obviously maintained the connection with Guy, being my brother, and the professional world. And really, when this invention came about, it was a case of, well, let's, really need to think again about what I'm doing, and just decided that this was the idea that was really worth pursuing with everything. So it was a case of, we're gonna focus on this now, because it feels really important. That's it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Guy, as you can imagine, you're pretty busy, but
I mean, for me, it's a godsend, because it means that because I'm involved in this world anyway. So this is a genuine solution for me as a mix engineer. I can mix Atmos anywhere with this system. So it's as much a personal thing, but I mean, it's such an obvious problem in the industry that it just seemed a no-brainer to commit to this. And we're both very focused on getting this to as many people as possible, particularly, as Dan said, partners.
Okay. So and we're broadcasting from British Grove Studio One. So that room you can see there in the slide is behind us, which it's a real privilege actually to be here. But again, it's because I think it highlights the amount of interest in the professional world in the technology. Everyone wants it to work, and that includes Mark Knopfler himself, who allows me to use this space to really develop and fine-tune the technology. And I've put a statement there saying where it began. That is absolutely true. The technology was sort of born at home in my shed, literally. And then the very early versions are brought in here to really discover, how it could work compared to here they use ATC loudspeakers, really world-class monitoring system, and you're hearing the differences. But it was because of the level of interest of the engineers who are working here and the people around the studio that really that gave me the confidence to really pursue this.
It kind of galvanized the idea immediately, because engineers would walk in and say, "Whoa, what am I hearing here?" And that started the ball rolling, really.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot of words and probably made a lot of promises, but if you just visually think about it, we've touched on 714 on the left there. That is 7.1.4 layout, and there are guidelines about where you have to place those speakers. And the Airsound Spatial approach, at its simplest, we recommend two speakers, one at the front, one at the back. They don't actually need to be exactly there for reasons that I'll come on to. But as you can see, at a stroke, the capability to deliver a similar sound field, one is a heck of a lot easier than the other. And I've mentioned also accreditation. This guy, an absolute legend, Glyn Johns. We'd had a lovely interview with him, and there's a lovely quote there. If you go to our website, you'll see we've captured quotes from people and done. There's a little video, in fact, with Glyn, and him saying it doesn't seem like it's possible what you're hearing. So it's a lovely little quote from someone who clearly knows what he's hearing. So we talked a little bit also about the spatial audio in general, and it's interesting. We sometimes forget. We're so immersed in the technology, literally, we sort of forget what's known and what's not known. Guy mentioned earlier that there's an awful lot of production happening. There's an awful lot of stuff being produced in Atmos and other spatial formats. But from the consumer's perspective, maybe that's not known about. But what I've observed happening is that certainly the streaming services there at the top, the Apple TV, Apple Music, Netflix, Disney Plus, etc., they offer HD subscriptions, and typically they'll come with spatial audio streaming. And spatial audio as an idea is becoming part of the general vocabulary. People are getting to know it and associate it with it being premium. People may not generally understand the spatial placement of speakers, but what's important to know is that the content's there, and anyone considering buying a premium product, that kind of spatial audio delivery is becoming a hygiene factor, right? And so I think brands need to consider that. The most well-known format, of course, is Dolby Atmos, and something that's happened behind the scenes. There's a lot of talk now about Eclipse audio, particularly, and associated with Google and YouTube. Some very interesting things developing there, and that's something we're watching closely. The idea that any YouTube channel will be in spatial audio in the not too distant future, which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
Wow.
So, all that content, and currently the only way practically to hear it is with headphones, which is not the most brilliant experience compared to the studio. We deserve better.
Right.
Another chap who, Chris Porter, worked with Wham, George Michael, he is another Airsound Spatial user, mixing with the system. And he just blown away by the fact that with just two speakers, you get a really well-defined audio experience.
So in the background there with Chris, I see he's got your Airsound, and then it looks like maybe some Genelec monitors. So would he be testing his Atmos mix over the Airsound?
Precisely. It's like having a second pair of monitors, or in this case, a separate system. And he enjoys checking his mixes on different systems, and he uses Airsound.
It's a really important part of the process, isn't it, Guy?
Yeah.
Being able to get another perspective on your work. It's like I remember being in bands and recording something in a studio, and I'd listen to it on the cassette on the way home in the car. Of course, in Atmos, you just don't get that experience simplistically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Currently, engineers only have their Atmos setup, which, of course, they spent huge amounts of money buying and installing. Now we're offering another way for them to check their mixing.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So digging a little bit deeper in terms of what's behind Airsound Spatial, it's a combination of two things, and it does link back to the technology I was dealing with in the Orbit Sound days, but it's a much more advanced interpretation of that, and that's dipoles. So there's I call it 20% hardware, 80% software is what it is. Obviously, there's a patent that's now published that discusses this in a lot more detail. But you have at its heart, you've got speakers on the side of a product which are out of phase with each other that deliver this dipolar sound field, and that sound field has certain characteristics to do with being able to manipulate how we hear where sound's coming from. This comes back to the human experience of hearing location of sound. And what the software does is it interprets where the sounds should be coming from in terms of the mix and where the physical speakers are, and uses the dipoles to kind of deliver that. So you have a loudspeaker that can reproduce, or I call it steering. It steers sound either clockwise or anti-clockwise or vertically around the listener by any distance, and it's a dynamic system. So it's a sort of it's a connection between what we have is a virtual set of loudspeakers, the 714. We still reproduce 714 if we're listening to Apple Music, but we treat them as virtual loudspeakers. And what the software and the dipoles does is it delivers them in a physical space with either 2, 3, or 4 speakers. And it's flexible. Those speakers can be positioned where you want. Yeah.
Okay. And like you said, 80% software. I mean, because I'm just thinking of like those guys from Sonic Emotion from about, what was that, 15 years ago or so? They had something similar in hardware, but would you say the leap has come for you guys in the software? With processing power?
Different kind of approaches. There's different sort of camps, if you like, of approaches as to how you can reproduce spatial sound.
Right.
And dipoles are not really used very much. Dipoles are the least kind of utilized. Most of the advanced kind of approaches, I think, use a technology called WFS, where you have typically you have a bar and you have lots of sound sources and it's using quite heavy processing to create a sound field,
Yeah,
and it's incredible. It's
wave field synthesis, right? Yeah,
like WFS precisely, yeah.
yeah.
And that that works incredibly well. But the challenge with that technology is that it's very processor heavy and therefore quite costly to implement,
Okay.
and very sweet spot dependent as well. You have to do a lot of room alignment and lots of tuning to tune it for position. Saying that, there are some really great things out there. I mean, I've seen Audio Scenic come up with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very impressive technology as a world.
Mm-hmm.
This is that. this is dipoles. We focus entirely on our ability to hear sound direction through phase differences, and the software uses that to steer sound with those cues. It's a much more, whereas the former technology is very much pinned to a spot. This is a very open experience. Okay. It doesn't matter where you are. As long as you can hear the front and the side of the loudspeaker, which is everywhere because there's two sides, you will hear a sound stage emanating from a single speaker. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, not at all. So this is another chap, Stephen Wilson, who's a tremendous engineer, actually. And Guy mentioned, he in fact uses a 2-speaker Airsound Spatial system in another room to check back mixes. And he's really passionate about it, actually. It's saying it's going to kickstart the spatial audio revolution, which is quite a cool thing to hear. But I'll introduce you very briefly to the Airsound Spatial PLS. So it became apparent when we were testing on that first day in British Grove, when engineers came by and heard it. A chap named Nigel Heath, who's a film TV mix engineer, and he said, "I need it. I need a system," because all the time all I had was a prototype. So even though our goal is to really work with partners to develop speakers, we knew we needed a solution for people sort of here and now. So we've created this thing called the Airsound Spatial PLS, which stands for Professional Listening System. It's very hand built. I think there's only about 30 systems in the world currently. They're really for people in the industry and for demonstrating the capabilities of the technology. And it's deliberately made to look almost a bit like a consumer product that you'd want at home. I think that's to inspire the kind of products I think where we want to end up, right? These are products that you would be happy to have around you that just produce this amazing immersive audio. But this is a professional loudspeaker system, and I've got one behind me here. And just to highlight a little design feature, again, it's all to do with the flexibility of placement. This particular speaker is designed to fit on a mic stand, which is quite useful for a studio, or you put in a tabletop base, or you wall mount it. So the systems that are in use really fit in and around what people already have, rather than dictating.
So it's perfect for small studios, for example, in my world, that can't put a proper Dolby accredited Atmos system in because the ceiling is too low or the room is too small, or there's a door right where you need to put a speaker, which is a very common problem. With our system, you don't need to put that speaker where the door is. You can put it wherever's convenient for you. As long as you tell the software that it's in that new position, it corrects everything and you get exactly the same immersive experience. That's the flexibility of our system.
So that's the hardware of the loudspeaker, the 20%, but the 80% is the software. So we've developed this software called ASAP, the Airsound Spatial Audio Processor, I'm not doing a live demo. I'm just illustrating a few of the key features. This is Mac based because that's what the industry uses, and its main control panel I've just shown there. And really just to illustrate, so you see the dots on the bottom there, those are the virtual loudspeakers that you're listening to at any given time. These are the those are the speakers that your software, which might be something like Pro Tools, will see and you're working with. And you can dynamically change it if you have a need. So the first slot there is 7.1.4, and the next one is 916. But you might suddenly need to listen to something in 5.1, like an old DVD or something. So the third slide is that. But just to show we can also go the other way and go crazy. There's no limit to the number of virtual loudspeakers we can reproduce with this system. And the last one there is an approximate a model of the Las Vegas Sphere, which I've included just for a bit of,
which is actually in use.
Yeah.
That algorithm is in use by somebody.
Yeah, so it's just a way of illustrating that actually, because we've broken the link between physical speakers and real speakers and replaced it with this technology that can steer, you could disguise the limit. Anything from mono right up to Las Vegas Sphere is monitoring in your small room. It's not a problem.
Wow.
And yeah.
Are the speakers, so they're wireless speakers? It's Wi-Fi connected?
No, I mean, I think if people were going to develop a product going forwards, I think you would definitely need features like that. But being a hand-built product, it's driven by an analog amplifier. It's but it's a single cable. It's really not difficult to set up.
But it could easily be a Bluetooth system.
Oh yeah.
That just needs to be developed. It's not a problem.
Yeah. So you would stream the Dolby Atmos source material into a PC and process it there.
So the way it works currently is that this ASAP software runs on your Mac, and anything running on your Mac that plays to the virtual sound card that it gives, which might be 916, will play out through the system. And there's quite a lot of things actually that support spatial audio sort of by default, and there's more coming. Like I mentioned YouTube earlier, they're not there yet, but Apple TV and Apple Music, for example, are completely integrated. So everything you watch or hear comes out in Atmos. Or Apple Spatial, let's say. Excuse me. Yeah.
Okay.
Going forwards, I think you would a consumer product wouldn't work like that. I think you would need an HDMI decoder and a typical decode of a standard stream, first for watching, Netflix or whatever. And then it would play out. So you would build that technology in. It's not technically difficult, but it's the kind of task that you need a product to be developed that's built on a certain scale to be able to do that. Because there's quite a lot of licensing, quite a lot of software development, sort of the heavy lift of it to be done. But that's with any product that does that job. So we've had solution agile for now as a concept, proof of concept.
Oh, okay. So have you kind of mapped out what kind of processors would be needed in the device? Yeah. Is it? And do we have an idea? Like, is it some standard processors, or were you talking like a heavy?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can't go into too much details, but the standard solutions that are available, the standard SoCs that you would need anyway to run those kind of decoders, this would simply be a reconfiguration and a software module that you would add, and then that would do it. So you would redesign the hardware to support the side speakers and the height and the front, which incidentally is way fewer channels, which is why we talk about a cost reduction. And then the software, the decode, does the magic of the steering of the sound. So you end up with, let's say for example you've got a sound bar with 3 channels at the front and 3 channels at the back. That can deliver 916 wirelessly with all that technology built in, which does the job of a soundbar of 12 or 16 channels. So it's quite a big evolution in terms of step forward in terms of the perceived experience, but also a step reduction in cost. That's what makes it super exciting. But we need to work with partners who are able to engineer products at that level.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I've got some ideas.
Well, you're all ears.
Yeah, all ears.
This is the last techie slide I've got on ASAP. So the settings page there just illustrates how this works. So each one of those dials you can see that go 0, 215, 138, those are in fact physical angles of the speaker relative to the soundstage. So in that, the way I've got it set there, I've got three speakers roughly as a three points in a room. So that's the angle within the room. And that just, it's so, we're used to seeing dials that turn things up or down or change the sound. That dial changes the position of the loudspeaker in the room.
So that's just telling the software where the speaker is.
Yeah.
So it can reproduce a virtual array.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very much development software, but I think it gives you a glimpse under the hood as to how different this is and how it works. And I think for a consumer, it would be quite fun to create, an app that you could put on a phone that you would point at the speaker that would then positionally track where it is. And then as far as the calibration is concerned for the room, that's it. The software just needs to know where the speakers are relative to each other and where you want the front to be, which might be your TV. And it would then run a ping or a sweep to get the levels set correctly, as in just balance the levels of each speaker so that they're roughly the same. And that would be it. You could complete the whole process in a few seconds. And we know this because when we've done so many demos now, we turn up with a car, unload, and 10 minutes later we're up and running. So it's the setup is super simple. It's very different to the kind of sophisticated alignment that's sometimes needed for this kind of technology.
So when we say effortless spatial audio, we really do mean it genuinely. It really is effortless.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good out of the box experience is always helpful in consumer to avoid those nasty returns.
Returns. I hope you'd say that. That is the definition of successful product. Another chap, I saw him the other day, Emre Ramzanoglu. He's great. This leads me on to a slight diversion. So I've mentioned the technology in the context of sound bars, but actually the technology is applicable in a lot of different places. So he's a mix engineer, and he just heard an installation that I'd done, and I'll come on to that. So the technology at the moment, we've really cracked studio. We're really exploring home. The idea of having 2 or 3 units that fill a room with spatial audio. My own car, I've got a 2-speaker system in my car as well that we're experimenting with, which is
devastatingly good, I have to say.
Thank you.
I would say that.
And a professional install. And I've got an example, a case study, which I just put up on the website, which is at the Distillery 2 in Bristol. So this is a fairly big space with a very powerful stereo speaker system. And I said to them, look, could we do an experiment? Could I use this room to test using Airsound? So it's a bit like the original story when I came to British Grove. I just walked in to do a test, but it was so successful that the owners decided they wanted it installed permanently. So now what we've done is installed an Airsound Spatial. There's a little MacBook Air, which we've dedicated to the task, which runs the audio processing on a Dante network. Mm-hmm. And we've installed a dipole array. So you can see at the top right there, these are Martin Audio standard PA speakers, but we've pointed them differently and we're driving them in this dipole arrangement. And as a result, you now get really good spatial audio throughout that space. So it's tremendous. You take a room that can only do stereo and has a sweet spot and turn it into, this room that can pretty much play anything.
So they're very excited because they can do playbacks to huge numbers of people in Atmos, which is currently not easy to do.
Not easy at all.
Right.
No. Yeah. So it's verging on being quite disruptive because the number of speakers we're adding here is relatively few, but the experience is quite incredible. And it was Emre, the guy who was on the slide just now. He dropped by and heard it, and he was listening to that system, listening to mixes he'd done, he was saying, I can hear where I positioned everything, everywhere it was supposed to be, which, considering it's a big PA system and a first of its kind, I think that's a real achievement. So I'm really looking forward to exploring this. And I can see, clubs, bars, potentially busy spaces where the SPLs are quite high, but you could then really take the experience of the sound to the next level. So it's pretty cool.
Just so I'm clear on this, like it's a different hardware implementation in the distillery here, and you're still driving it with the same software.
Absolutely standard speakers, okay, but we're just using them slightly differently. We've selected the speaker slightly differently because of the frequency is required, and we're using our dipolar steering to create sounds from where there aren't speakers.
Right.
So that array behind at the back of the stage there.
Yeah. Flying wedges or.
Precisely. What it's capable of doing is playing sounds that, from the point of view of the listener, causes you to hear things coming from different places.
Okay.
So,
yeah. In the same way our system here does.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Just a lot more SPLs.
Yeah. So in total, that system is 8 channels.
Right.
But through those 8 channels, we're able to deliver any sound field. So we were running 916 typically. And because it's running on Dante, they're also able to stream directly stuff from their control room as well. So it's another technology that really helps, because it's just gone are the days of rigging and running cables everywhere. You just use network ports and a bit of software. It's very amazing. Yes.
You still run a subwoofer?
Yeah. So those 4 big guys that the laptop's sitting on there, those are big subwoofers. Yeah.
This gives you an idea of the SPL.
Yeah, it's a big. Well, it's quite funny. I said to Sam Cunningham, the engineer putting it together, I said, just how much power is there? Because it felt pretty, the control was pretty low and it felt pretty powerful. And at that point, he had to get a calculator out. So yeah, it's a big system. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And that's it. I'll skip forward. I think we're pretty much there now. I don't know why. Sorry, chaps. Oh, there we go. It just took a moment to update. Phil Manzanera, another friend of ours. Yours, I think.
Yeah, very good friend of mine. Phil was in Roxy Music. I was in Roxy Music many years ago with Phil. He heard Airsound and immediately wanted to install it in his studio. He's actually just mixed his new album on Airsound. So he's very much a devoted user, and he loves it.
And another good example of the flexibility in his room, you can't have the rear speaker directly behind him because of the layout, so it's off to one side.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Which
and
is
yet
fine.
Capable works perfectly well. So just in summary. So we've got this wonderful technology. We love it, what we're doing and what we're getting involved with, and there's some really interesting conversations. So hopefully people feel inspired and will get in touch. But we're looking to try new things and apply it into some new places and products.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like movies, gaming, audio, all those categories. There's people, especially gaming is crazy for now that there's 50-year-old kids playing games with a budget. There's no expense spared to get the right system. So yeah, this is exciting for those brands developing products in all those areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slightly tangential question, if you don't mind. To what extent, when you're mixing an album or some music, do you attempt to compensate for lesser speakers, considering the audience may not have the top end stuff?
You don't. You really don't. Yeah, I mean, I think that was in the mindset maybe in the 80s when it was generally regarded that everybody consumed music on small radios. So you tended to check your mixes on small radios. Hence, it was the time of the Oratone speaker, which was a small speaker, and you used to stick one in the middle of the console, and you'd check your mix on that. But I think nowadays that's kind of gone out the window. It's generally assumed that people have good systems in terms of hi-fi systems. Of course, we're here to address the problem of people not having systems to listen to Atmos and spatial audio. So yes, you don't compensate in any way at all. You deliver the best experience, because when you've got an Atmos system in your studio and you're making a mix, it truly does sound extraordinary. And you want to mix it to the best of your ability, and just hope down the line there will be more systems available to reproduce it. Which is why we're here. Which is why I'm extremely passionate about getting this to everybody.
Hey, one more slightly tangential, if you don't mind. See, a lot of stereo systems used to come out with, maybe still do this, to come out with the preset EQ settings for pop, rock, jazz, and whatever it might be, house music or something. Does that irritate recording artists? Because it implies that you've made a mistake on your recording, doesn't it?
Again, it's something that's been around since the 60s. We've got an old console here from the Beatles era, and that itself has EQ settings for pop and classical. So it's something that we live with, and it's been around in music forever, really. But we don't really think about that. We just make the best.
There's some sort of disconnect between manufacturers and the music industry.
Yeah, well, in those days, it was more to do with the circuitry. There were preset EQ modules that they would slot into the console for classical recording, and they realised that for pop recording, or bands like the Beatles at the time, you need something a little brighter, and so they created a different EQ plugin. Literally, it was the birth of the plugin.
Interesting.
So it's been around in the history of recording forever.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, it's a nice, succinct summary. Guy, Daniel, thanks so much for joining us today. Everybody,
Pleasure.
shoot your questions down below wherever you're watching this, and we'd love to hear from you. And please like, subscribe, and share all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks again.